slide. We go to the next slide, please. Yeah, quick note to all attendees, this presentation is being recorded. It and the slides that will be available on CPUC's website in a few days under the informational webinar section, along with a number of other slides. So yeah, we're going to get started with our program today. My name is Christopher Moore. I'm with External Affairs Division of CPUC. I'm a local government liaison, and I work on energy issues as well as help out with local governments and community-based organizations on the Central Coast. I'm joined by my colleagues Heather and Hope, also there, as well as our esteemed panelists, who I will introduce shortly. And we're going to be getting into some important internal functions of the PUC, internal and to some extent also independent, and which we use to assist ratepayers. Can we go to the next slide, please? Closed captioning is available if you want to turn it on at the bottom left of your screen. And could you go to the next slide, please, Heather? All right, in terms of questions, you're welcome to pose them at any time. We're going to be monitoring the chat, and so we'll be using that to, we'll be collecting those questions and posing them to the panelists. So feel free to type them as they come to you. There'll be time for the panelists to answer questions at the end of each section, and then we're going to have also some time at the end of the webinar as well. And we may not do them exactly in the order that they're posed. We try to group them by subject if we have a number on the same topic. Next slide, please. Okay. So we're going to hear from two very different parts of the CPUC that carry out very important and different functions. The Consumer Affairs Branch, or CAB, which is there if you're unable to resolve a service or billing issue with your utility. It's a good resource to know about for any utility customer. It's also an important one for local government and community-based organizations to be aware of, so that they can refer any of their constituents who may be having ongoing challenges. Sometimes also these challenges are grouped in a particular area, so it's particularly good to know that these people have a resource that they can go to. Secondly, we're going to be hearing from the Public Advocates Office, or Cal Advocates, which plays an active role in CPUC's proceedings and making sure that utility customer interests are being represented. I should note that the Public Advocates Office is different from the Public Advisor's Office. It's confusing. I know we all struggle with it. Just know there is a difference there, and if you go to one or the other, people are happy to, we're always happy to help because we understand it's not the best. But the Public Advisor's Office is associated with us. They help you become a party to the CPUC decision. So just there's an assistance side, which you can come to us, or the very advocacy side here, which Barry's going to be speaking about today. We go to the next slide, please. This webinar is being hosted by the External Affairs Division's Business and Community Outreach team. If you're a local government or community-based organization that's confused about our acronyms, our policies, have an issue with a utility that's perhaps not directly a complaint or even a complaint, we can help you get over to CAB too. Any of those, or you just want to connect with a live person and learn a bit more about how the PUC works, we're here to connect. We go to the next slide, please. Here's our information there. Feel free to screenshot it if you want. Also, if you go to our website or you just search for CPUC Business and Community Outreach, Community Liaisons, this should pop up and you'll find our information there. And we're a one-stop shop who can help you navigate the different aspects of the PUC. Can we go to our next slide, please? All right, and so with that, we're going to hear from our first speakers, Anita Mallard and Heather Dunham. Anita was born and raised in Nashville, Tennessee, and was the oldest of 6 kids right after graduating. She enlisted in the Army and served 7 years, where she learned a lot about discipline, order, confidence, dedication, drive. She started college at San Francisco State and ended up getting a BS in business administration, accounting, tech management. She's been in management leadership her whole career, from platoon leader to team lead, and moved from the private sector to the DMV and then to the CPUC in January 2022 as a consumer affairs rep. She's learned a lot about utilities. She's also enjoyed helping others, and this has helped her do that. She was promoted to staff services analyst when she was part of the data team. However, helping others. In October, she accepted the position as staff services manager 1, continuing to learn and grow. She's a huge football fan, actually more so than her husband. She watches a lot of football, and her favorite team is the Titans. Her hobbies include listening to all types of music, jazz being her favorite, shopping, watching movies, and going to classic car shows. Heather is MBA, CPUC, and Consumer Services Supervisor. She's also a mother, business professional, and advocate for the betterment of others. She's a graduate of Michigan State, has worked in education business for 25 years with a strong background in telecommunications and nonprofit leadership. She's a native of Detroit. She relocated to California in 2009, and shortly after relocating, she stepped out of her comfort zone and began working in telecommunications for Verizon Wireless headquarters. She spent 4 years with the company and grew to absolutely love business and management. In turn, she made a decision to advance her education in this area, earning a master's degree in business administration in 2013. Heather has since used her knowledge of business to give her community back to her community, promote literacy among children, assist others with career leadership development. In 2023, she joined Consumer Affairs branch as a consumer services supervisor, where she now uses her gifts to manage the team of consumer affairs representatives and assist thousands of customers across the state of California with their investor-owned utility concerns. She loves laughter, children, serving the public, and ultimately using her voice as a resource to help others grow, develop, and navigate public challenges. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the experts. Heather and Anita, take us away.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Again, I'm Heather Dunham. I'm a Consumer Services Supervisor here with the Consumer Affairs Branch, aka CAB, of the CPUC. Joining me, as you already have been told, is my colleague Anita Mallard. She is a staff services manager here in CAB. And so today, Anita and I are just going to share a little bit about CAB, what we do, how we do it, and how we're able to assist California consumers. Before we get started, we want to just get an idea of, what you might already know about contacting CAB. Next slide, please. So I have a couple of questions here. I want you all to jump into the chat, bring some of your energy there. The first question being, and you can just post this right in the chat, we'll have someone sharing it out. In terms of days, when is the last time you reached out to the CPUC? And what do we have coming in the chat?
I think everybody's shy this morning. Nobody's given us an answer to your question.
Oh, I see something coming in here yesterday. Okay.
Mark had to deal with the CPUC yesterday. Love it. Welcome, Mark.
And then, true or false, I have never filed a complaint before with the CPUC. And this is in your individual experience.
Oh, we've got a couple.
Some of the responses.
Garrett's never had to. Let's see. Linda says it's true. She's filed a complaint. Chris has filed a complaint. So we have a couple different people who are familiar.
All right. So our experience is a little bit mixed. Sounds good. So we're gonna jump right in and chat about CAB. You'll get to know a little bit more about us, and hopefully when you leave here today, you'll be able to take something away and feel comfortable reaching out to us. Next slide, please. All right, so the Consumer Affairs branch, one of the things that I think is so magical about CAB are the people behind it. We're your community volunteers outside of the CPUC. We are youth sports coaches. just an array of things that we do outside the CPUC. And then that energy just transfers right into the work that we do here. And so I'll introduce some of the faces to you that work behind the scenes. We're headed up by our fearless leader, Clover Selden, which is our program manager. Then we have CAB broken up into 3 units, and you'll hear more about this. But our operations unit, which facilitates responses to consumer contacts and complaints. On the written operations side, that team is headed up by Rosa Sauer, Staff Services Manager 2. And then we have Rebecca Singleton, which is she's a consumer services manager, and she oversees the phone operations side of things. The operations unit is a unit that you're going to really more so hear about today, because this is the unit that works more closely with the public in the sense of taking in complaints and just more hands-on with what you might experience when you reach out to us. We do also have our consumer analysis and programs unit. That unit analyzes complaints for customer trends to assist decision makers. That team is headed up by Lisa Bass, program and project supervisor. And then finally, we have our quality assurance unit, which focuses on case management, data quality, and training. And that team is headed up by Felicity Wood, Staff Services Manager 2. We have a team of pretty much over 50 strong, so we're a pretty nice size team here in CAB. All right, next slide. So who we are and what we do. So as I mentioned before, CAB consists of, on the operations side, 2 teams. We have our phone operations team, which is really the front line. This team is taking calls and doing what we can to assist consumers. Then we have our written operations team, which when you file a complaint, this is the team that will be addressing your complaint. So this team addresses all written, informal complaints from consumers regarding matters related to their investor-owned utility providers. In addition to the work that we do here in CAB, we also do service complaints that revolve around Lifeline as well as transportation. Next slide. So when you reach out to CAB, we'll kind of go through a little bit of how we do what we do. So when you do a phone contact, give us a call. Again, this is really our front line. So on the phone operations team, which is actually the team that I serve on, when you call in, we're looking to determine if the matter is regulated or we'll say jurisdictional for the CPUC. If the matter is jurisdictional, meaning that it's something that we do regulate, when you reach out to the utility to review the consumer's concerns and open the opportunity. So we're looking to open the opportunity for utilities for consumers to get their issues resolved before it goes into a written complaint. So this team is really really handling more of our inquiries. At the phone operations level, it's very much so, again, inquiry based. If you're calling in, we might transfer you over to the utility in hopes that the utility will connect with you right there at that time and then get your issue resolved without you having to take the next step of writing in. If the matter is not jurisdictional, meaning we are not able to regulate that issue, we make every effort that we can to get the consumer to the appropriate party who can assist and address their concerns, whatever that may look like. Now, in the event that a consumer does decide to write into us and send us an informal complaint, then that informal complaint is seen and managed by the written operations unit, which we also call our WOO team. Now, Anita is one of the managers, and she serves on the written operations unit. So I'm going to call her on right at this time. And then she'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like and give you a little bit more background or share some stats with you on the work that we do. We're all very passionate about what we're doing, and the proof is in the pudding, if I can put it that way. All right, I need to come on off of chat and join us here.
Thank you so much,
Take off of
Heather,
mute.
and thank you so much, Heather, for the introduction. And again, like Heather says, I am the Staff Services Manager 1 over the Written Operations Team, or the WU unit. We are responsible for receiving informal complaints and getting that information out to the utilities so we can assist our consumers with whatever their concerns are. Our impact on the customers so far this quarter from year to date is we've received about 40,000 phone contacts and written complaints total. Our phone team, our front line, they're responsible for taking about 27,000 calls. And like Heather says, they are the ones that educate our consumers, help them get to where they need to be if it's something that we can help them with right away, help them to figure out what we do in terms of taking their complaints and what we can assist them with. So Heather's team does a really good job of that. Our written contacts team right now, we have taken over 15,000 letters, whether it's emails, written complaints from the physical writing address or in our inbox. So we take those complaints and we get those over to our staff services analysts to make sure they contact the utilities and provide that information to the utilities on what the consumer is looking for so we can assist them in getting their issues resolved. As a team, as a whole, we have assisted the consumers in receiving over $5 million back in refunds. So that means if they have billing issues and they're looking, to get reimbursed for overcharges, or they overpaid for, they feel like they've overpaid, our teams, both phone and written, have assisted our customers in getting those monies back. So that's a big number for our consumers. So, and I give kudos out to both of our teams because they work diligently and we partner with one another to make sure that we're doing the right things for our consumers. Next slide, please. As you can see, here are some examples of some of the types of utilities complaints we take. It's not a full list, it's just a small example. We take billing issue concerns, and those concerns, pretty much the biggest thing we see are high bills. That's when the consumers are saying they don't know why the bills are high, or it's not matching what they think it should match, or they are comparing their bills from year over year and they don't see why it either increased the way it did or why it should increase the way it does. So we look at those and, we get those out to the utilities to respond, and they're really good about providing us a breakdown on how those charges come about. We take care of, we also assist with late payment charges, payment arrangements when the consumers are saying they can't pay their bills or they've had an arrangement in place and it's not working. We do get that information over to the utilities as well. We also assist with meter issues. That means in terms of the meters are not read correctly or the meters are reading someone else's bills incorrectly. Anything that results in meter, and it does include electric and water. We also do gas as well because we do have gas meters out there also. We also assist with net metering, that is solar consumers. So when there's errors in generating their credits or they haven't receive their permission to operate to get those credits, we also assist with that as well. Safety concerns. Those could mean quite a few things, whether it's a gas leak or low-hanging lines, or the consumer feels like there's something, a safety matter. Could be a pole that they feel like is leaning, or it's not standing right or not in the right place. Then those are the types of safety concerns that we look out for as well. Transportation, we only regulate passenger carriages, so Uber and Lyft. So any concerns related to that, we also reach out or assist the consumers with that. As far as our service issues, outages, if PG&E is PG&E or SDG&E or any of the major utilities are constantly causing outages for whatever they're doing, whether it's servicing their poles or servicing their equipment, we assist the consumers with that as well. If they're constantly having their phone service outages, or consumers are always complaining about the phone lines are down when it rains, or they're disconnected because they haven't paid, or disconnected because they paid and payments haven't been received, we assist with those as well. So this is just a small example of some of the types of things we assist our consumers with on a day-to-day basis. Next slide, please. So when a consumer has or is ready to file a complaint, and we do encourage our consumers to reach out to the utilities first to give them an opportunity to try to resolve their complaints. And when they feel like they've reached for lack of a better word, a wall, then they can reach out to us via email at consumer_affairs@cpuc.ca.gov, or they can file a complaint also online. Heather, are you able to show the complaint form so we can go over to see what it looks like? Now, when the consumer decides to file a complaint online, this is what the form will look like. They'll put in all of their information with regards to, their personal information, name, address. But the most important information for us is the name of the utility, the account number. We want them to provide us some type of description of what their complaint is. Because if they don't provide a description, that can delay the process, because we need to know what they're wanting us to do. The utility's response to the complaint, once we reach out to the utility, they will respond, and we will give a response to the consumer. At that point, once the form is complete, they will receive a reference number, and they can take that reference number and actually see the status on the case when they go back online. It doesn't tell them what steps we're in, but it will tell them if the case is still open or if it's closed. If it's closed, of course, it's going to generate a call, and we can give them more information on what's going on with the complaint if they have not received any correspondence. Next slide, please. Can you go back to the previous slide? I'm sorry, Heather. So if a consumer wants to write us, then they can also write us at our physical address, which is at the 505 Van Ness Avenue in San Francisco. And for our consumers that prefer to reach out to their legislative bodies, we have a dedicated mailbox for our constituents, and they can send those inquiries to our LEG inbox, with leg.constituent.complaint@cpuc.ca.gov. And we review those complaints, and we, reach out to the utilities to try to get clarification on what our legislative bodies are looking for their constituents, and try to resolve those matters as quickly as possible through those avenues. Next slide, please. I know that some consumers, when they write to or send any inquiry to the CPUC, they think it should, their response or their complaint should be completed within a few days, but it actually takes up to 45 days, because the utility has 30 days to respond. That gives them time to research what the consumer is concerned about, provide an explanation to the CPUC as well as the consumer, and at that point, once the consumer receives that resolution, they have the ability to say, no, I'm not satisfied with that resolution, and they can appeal that decision and come back to us, provided they provide new information. It can't be that I don't like the decision, I want to appeal it. They have to truly provide us additional information that says something wasn't right, or you guys did not consider all the information before you made the resolution to this case. At that point, should they provide that information, we will resubmit that to the utility, because our goal is to make sure they address all of the consumer's concerns and resolve all the consumer's matters before they consider their case closed and before we consider our case closed. Once that has been done and the consumer is still not satisfied, at that point, they can file an informal complaint, and those complaints are handled by our public advisor's office. And at that point, we provide the forms for them to fill out and provide the information as far as contact information, phone numbers, addresses, and email addresses, so they can file that complaint to continue their assistance or request for assistance. At that point, they would go in front of an administrative law judge that would make the decision based on the information provided from both the consumer and the utility. Next slide. And that is what we do as a whole here in the Consumer Affairs branch. Between the phone team and the written operations, we do the very best we can to make sure we take care of our consumers, whether it's calling the utilities, reaching out to them by email, reaching out to them by letter. We want to make sure our consumers are taken care of. And depending on the situation, if it's jurisdictional, we would take care of it right away. And again, we do all of our due diligence to make sure they're taken care of. So at this point, I'll pause for any questions that anyone may have.
All right.
Thank you. We did have a couple of questions come through the chat. First question was from Jeannie, who wanted to know what type of complaints people can make to the CPUC, which I think you addressed. Jeannie, if we didn't respond to that question, please let us know in the chat and we can expand on that. Another question, is there a statute of limitations on how far back I can go to file a complaint?
Well, it's not a statute of limitations. As long as you provide the information, it's up to the utility to tell us what information they can provide us. I know that they have a record keeping time frame, and if that record keeping time frame is past what we can or what they can get, they will let us know. But they will do everything in their power to get their archives, to review documentation or whatever they're looking for, whether it's statements or something within their billing issues or billing concerns, then they will do their due diligence to make sure they can get the information for the consumer.
Okay, great. One more question came in. I'm a community-based organization. Are there any rules that would allow a third party to assist a consumer in filing a complaint with you?
Well, because of privacy, we really want the consumer to write into us. However, if someone is a contact for the consumer, they can file a complaint. The problem is when it gets to the utility, if the the customer record is not the person that's reaching out to the utility, that's when they have a hard time. If they are proxy or power of attorney, then certainly the utility will work with that third party to assist them. But again, that's something that they would have to at least have power of attorney for, or at least have the consumer available when they do reach out to this third party so they can speak on that person's behalf. Because again, you don't want someone speaking or getting information about a consumer that shouldn't get information about a consumer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just piggyback on that. Yeah, just when you are reaching out, there's some protocols in place with the utilities on things of that matter. So you'll definitely want to just have your documentation if you're looking to reach out on behalf of maybe a family member or something along that nature.
Perfect. Thank you. Sorry about the slides. We're having some technical difficulties, but we think we've gotten that resolved. There was one final question that came in wanting to know whether or not this presentation was going to be posted anywhere, and it will be posted on CPUC's website. You can find that information in the chat. I've posted that for you. So that's all we have at this point. Chris, back to you.
Yeah, and I did see there was a mark also about like rates, and yeah, we're just going to be in it. Looks like the person had to drop off, but just in terms of like rates and stuff, that's what we're going to be getting into next, and advocating for ratepayers, especially low-income ratepayers. That's something that Mary's going to be addressing in her presentation. So let's move on to the next slide. All right, I'm going to give Mary a quick intro. She was hired in 2022 as a policy and strategic communications advisor for the Public Advocate's Office. In this role, she heads communication, leads press and media inquiries, and coordinates outreach efforts. Before joining the Public Advocate's Office, Mary was the Chief of Staff for the Environment Program at the William and Laura Hewlett Foundation. There she led grant-making efforts on international climate diplomacy and worked on issues related to energy access, climate finance, and sustainable transportation. Mary also has an extensive experience working with various nonprofits such as Grid Alternatives and In Our Backyards, where she gained expertise in rooftop solar, crowdfunding, community outreach, and strategic communications. She has a master's in public administration and environmental science and policy from Columbia University, and bachelor in arts in environmental analysis and policy from Boston University as well. So thank you, Mary. I just asked, we had a little bit from Heather Iamith on what their interests and hobbies are. So maybe you could give us a quick personal note as well, if you don't mind, Mary.
Sure. Thanks, Chris. I don't often talk about my hobbies anymore, but my dog is in the background. I'm an avid walker with her, and I also love music and knitting and all of the things. So thank you for the introduction. Hi, everyone. Thanks for taking time out of your day to join us. We really appreciate it. As Chris mentioned, I'm Mary Flannelly. I am the Policy and Communications Advisor at the Public Advocate's Office. And I'm excited to tell you a little bit about who we are and how we represent utility customers in California. And at the end of the session, I'm happy to address whatever questions I can regarding rates or anything else you might want to know about our office. Next slide, please. So I thought I'd give a brief intro on who we are and our mission just to start. And Chris, thank you also for clarifying that we are not the Public Advisor's Office. I do realize we have the same acronym. It is quite confusing, so I appreciate that. So our office was created almost 50 years ago now, when the California legislature recognized the need for an independent body to advocate on behalf of utility ratepayers. So we were tasked with ensuring that customers receive safe, reliable utility services at reasonable rates. Just to underscore, we're the only independent state-mandated consumer advocate in California. So we are unique that way and represent utility customers as a whole before the CPUC and in other venues across energy, water, and communication services. I think it's also worth noting that we have our own budget that is entirely separate from the CPUC. And the director of our office has full control over that budget and how we allocate our resources. So that means that the CPUC doesn't direct what priority issues we work on or how we allocate our money. So I think that's an important point. And lastly, our director is appointed by the governor and approved by the Senate and has no term limit, whereas commissioners typically have 6-year term limits. Next slide, please. So what is our mission and how do we represent customers like you every day? So our office is comprised of analysts, engineers, lawyers, and policy and technical experts who advocate for the lowest possible rates for customers of California's regulated utilities, consistent with safety, reliability, and the state's environmental goals. A little bit of a mouthful. We were given the authority to represent the interests of utility consumers in proceedings before the CPUC, and we participate in hundreds of those each year. If you're not familiar with what a proceeding is, it's basically a formal process where decisions are made about important issues that you all care about, like how much you pay for electricity, gas, water, etc. I always think of it like a court case where parties present arguments, evidence, and testimony, and a decision is ultimately made by the CPUC. Another quick aside, I think it's also worth noting that we're independent and treated as a party in these proceedings. So there's a bit of a firewall, for lack of a better term, between us and the CPUC decision makers. So we can't really just walk up to CPUC commissioners and start advocating for our positions. There are rules we have to abide by like any other party, but we are unique in that we do have broad discovery rights similar to what the CPUC has, whereas other parties do not. And I'm happy to get into that also a little later. So next slide. I hope you can all see this. I won't walk through the whole thing, but I thought it was important to talk through some of the differences between the Public Advocate's Office and the Consumer Affairs branch you just presented. I think the key takeaways here are that we both advocate for and assist consumers and protect consumers and ensure fair practices. And we do those things a little differently. So our office, the Public Advocate's Office, is independent from the CPUC, and we represent customers as a group in CPUC proceedings. The Consumer Affairs branch, on the other hand, is embedded within the CPUC and handles individual consumer complaints and inquiries, as we just heard. So if you're having a problem with the utility issue, you can contact them and they can provide that individual assistance, educate you about your rights as a consumer, and work with you to try to resolve or elevate those complaints. Our office doesn't handle individual complaints, but we do respond to consumers and will do our best to answer any questions where we can or redirect you to an office that can assist you. And our main inbox also helps to track broader trends and issues that are important to consumers. And it's immensely helpful in helping us to navigate our own priorities and can absolutely be used to help our work in front of the CPUC. I think next slide, that would be great. So diving a little bit into the specific work that we do mostly in proceedings, we largely review utility proposals. That is really our bread and butter. So when a utility wants to change rates or policies, we really review those requests meticulously. We do deep dives into their accounts where applicable and make sure those requests are fair and reasonable. And if we don't believe they are, we'll put forth counter proposals, basically. We also present evidence and provide expert analysis. So we gather facts, data, and expert opinions to build strong cases. So during proceedings, we present that evidence based on analysis showing why certain rate changes or policies can be good or bad for customers. To put it very plainly, it's definitely complex. In this way, we also argue on behalf of ratepayers to keep rates fair and do our best to ensure any rate increases are justified and not excessive. Although we are not the ultimate decision makers in the rate setting process or in proceedings, so we can really only put forth our comments and testimony. And lastly, we ensure accountability and service quality and hold utilities accountable to customers. So our goal is to ensure transparency and accountability in the rate setting process, essentially. And in addition to that, the public can participate by attending public hearings, submitting comments to the CPUC, and staying informed about those proceedings. Next slide, please. So how do we put this advocacy into practice? Well, I mentioned earlier that we participate in these proceedings, which as a reminder is like a court case. And I would say let me just say in 2023, we participated in over 200 proceedings on behalf of ratepayers. And I hope you can see it, but you can see a breakdown between the industry areas here. So with the majority of those proceedings being electric. And the stat at the top is slightly outdated. It's, I think, from the end of 2023, but in the last decade, we have saved consumers over $3.7 billion through our advocacy efforts. Some other examples of our work here include proposing plans to ensure large water utilities don't profit more than necessary in order to avoid surprise surcharges on customer bills and to lower bills. We also do analysis that can help to inform our overall work and really bolsters our recommendations. So an example of that is when our office developed a series of maps and analyses showing where telecommunication companies aren't serving low-income and disadvantaged communities with essential broadband services. These are just a few examples of the work that we do on a daily basis. And we also release an annual report every year that you can find on our website that highlights the work that we do for customers across energy, water, and communications. Next slide, please. So that concludes my presentation. I wanted it to be fairly quick. I'm sure that people have questions. I think, as previously mentioned, this slide deck will be made public. So here are some resources for you. Please take a look at our website and some of those resources I've highlighted here. I think there's our blog and our LinkedIn as well. I've also given my personal contact info at the bottom of the contact us section, and the contact info for our main inbox and the press inbox, which I also manage. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. If I'm unable to answer anything, please follow up with me over email, and I'll be sure to get you that answer. And thank you again for joining us.
Mary, we do have a question for you. The question reads, how are you advocating and assisting on behalf of ratepayers for reasonable rates when it's obvious reasonable rates are not implemented? Second, given the amount and size of the many rate increases in the PG&E service area, what is involved in your process for advocating?
Sure. So I think I'm going to just back up a little bit to, one, acknowledge that rates right now are out of control. We're in a rates crisis, and when I look at our inbox and the emails that I get every day, it's really clear that people are struggling. Rates are consistently outpacing inflation. We look at this quarterly to see who's struggling to pay their bills. I think the statistic currently is 1 in 5 households in California are behind on their utility bills. And we completely hear that people are hurting and empathize with that. So I just want to say that at the top. And I would say in the last few years, we've really been trying to get attention on this matter to make sure people see this overall trend of rates increasing at an unprecedented rate. To the question on reasonable rates, I would just first say that we can only put forth the evidence and testimony that we can provide, and we are not necessarily the decision makers. So we advocate for customers, and we are also concerned that utilities are over earning, and we fight vigorously for a reasonable rate of return. I would also say that we are really looking for an all hands on deck approach in terms of solutions in order to put downward pressure on rates. And what I mean by that is there's so many things that go into rates currently. Some of the major drivers of rates are upgrades to our infrastructure, which is a huge chunk of what is going into rates every day. And then there is also wildfire prevention. So utilities are spending a lot on wildfire mitigation measures to prevent fires started by their electrical equipment. And in response to increasing threat of wildfire, our office has advocated for cost-effective wildfire mitigation measures, and we work to ensure that the utilities implement necessary safety measures without overburdening ratepayers with excessive costs. So an example of that would be in the case of PG&E, we're really trying to make trade-offs between PG&E wanting to underground, I think it's 10,000 miles over X number of years, underground our transmission lines. That is incredibly costly. It's about $300 million a mile. And we're really trying to weigh how can we do that cost effectively? Are there other ways in which we can mitigate that risk and make sure that people are protected at lower costs? that won't excessively burden ratepayers. So that's one way in which we're working on trying to get rates down. Another way is that, and this is the last thing maybe I'll say, another thing that goes into rates are programs like net energy metering, which is the program or billing system that credits solar energy system owners for the electricity they add to the grid. So that program has actually been burdensome to non-solar customers. And the cost shift is monumental. I think it's about almost I think it's $6.8 billion that non-solar customers are essentially paying. And it is excessive. And, we have tried to reduce that burden on non-solar customers to help to put downward pressure on rates. So that's another way in which we advocate for customers and these kind of big and small changes in terms of, I guess, redefining or reimagining our rate setting processes.
Great, thank you for answering that. Another question, does Cal Advocates have metrics on how many customers they have spoken with to inform their work in the energy sector?
We do not have metrics on how many customers we speak to. Because we represent ratepayers as a whole in proceedings, and that is our mandate, we're not really set up to address individual customers on a daily basis. We have about 175 staff right now in communications. And I think that's where the consumer affairs branch at the CPUC can really help customers because they will work with you on addressing individual complaints.
Great. And just a reminder, if anybody has questions, please type them into the chat window and we'll be reading them out to our panelists. So for this next question, this might be good for any of our panelists to respond to. How do customer programs help reduce rates?
Does anyone else want to take that?
I could
Take it,
jump in
Mary.
quick. Maybe it's not something specific for here, but it's separate are the CARE and FARA programs. So the California Affordable Rates for Energy and I can't remember what FARA says, right? These are the income qualified programs are what we tend to point to when we're trying to, especially for low income customers, try to reducing their rates. There are these are separate programs as well. For example, there's we have equity programs built within like the solar for single family homes. So the disadvantaged community, DAC-SASH. We also have multifamily programs like that. And there's battery backup under the equity budget, the self-generation incentive program, which provides nearly free batteries for homes. And those programs are actually undersubscribed. So there's a number of different programs that we work on these things. We also have affordability proceeding, which tries to deal with a lot of this stuff as well. So those are just a few off the top of my head, but we have those are separate programs with separate separate subject matter experts who unfortunately are here today.
Thank you, Chris. One more question's come in. Can the public provide input to PAO to be used to help determine your position on rate increases?
I would say that you can certainly reach out to our main inbox. It will absolutely help to inform our positions. We also work very closely with other consumer advocates like the Utility Reform Network or TURN, which I can also put their website in the chat, I think. I'm not sure. I have a panelist feature. But we also do work, like I said, with other stakeholders. So if they have their finger on the pulse as well, you know, we don't work in a silo in that way. We certainly want to make sure that we're addressing real customer concerns, real issues amongst constituents, and we do that in those ways mainly. But you absolutely can reach out to us in the main inbox to address any or express any ideas or concerns that you may have.
I would just note real quickly that also the public advisor's office, the other PAO can also assist in terms of if you want to comment directly on a proceeding. So they help organize public participation hearings around any rate request, which are examples that happen early in the proceeding and are used for administrative law judges to sort of get a gauge on what's going on and what issues should be considered in the proceeding. We can also assist with you filing comments, so either becoming a party to the proceeding, and you can also always comment on the docket card. So we now have a possibility, if you go to that rate request, if you go to the PUC's website and find the docket, so where all the documents are kept, there's an option to provide public comment directly on there. And due to a change a couple of years ago, that actually becomes part of the record. So it is something that the commissioners can consider when they're weighing their decision.
Thank you, everyone. So at this time, I see no additional questions. I just want to open it up. If anyone has questions for any of our panelists today, please feel free to put that in the chat before we move on. Okay, seeing none. Chris?
Yeah, I'm interested in if Mary can maybe, you touched on briefly, and talk about raw discovery and talk about how, you know, your ability to do that versus other parties.
Sure. So as I understand it, because I am not an analyst and do not get into the nitty gritty of all of our accounts, is that we are able to request specific information from utilities and accounts from utilities and meticulously go through their books in ways that other parties just are not able to access. So in those ways, we have a more broad and in-depth view of where utilities are spending their money. And there have been scenarios in which we have seen that you know, utilities may be using ratepayer dollars in a way that they are not supposed to. And you know, we work within the confines of proceedings to ensure that that is adjusted and that there is accountability. So it's incredibly helpful to have that reach and access for our teams.
Okay. Thank you, Mary.
Sure. I hope that was sufficient.
No, it's interesting. Okay. Thank you. I'm not seeing any more questions. We give another. So, do we want to? I think we're just going to wrap early here. Then, we move to the next slide, please. Okay, so here's a few resources in terms of if you're looking to stay involved. So these are some of the more do-it-yourself options if you want to stay involved with the PUC, which we do see private individuals sometimes become quite substantially involved in our proceedings and claim compensation through our intervener compensation process. So if you if you have a unique perspective that you believe the PUC is not taking into account of, there's an option to get involved, and actually you can get your time reimbursed. It's not an easy process, but it is done by a number of dedicated individuals across the state. Here's you can always comment on the docket card here. This is where what I mentioned, where all if you have a proceeding number, you'll be able to find all the documents there. You'll be able to see what everything's been filed by the administrative law judge, by the various parties, and you can also comment directly here. So this is a place you can comment directly on the docket card. And we, like AT&T's recent application to be relieved of its carrier of last resort obligations. We've got thousands of comments. We see lots of comments of rate requests too, just because of the high, the upward trajectory of rates these days. It's also possible to subscribe to services here, and you can see who's a party here. So this is actually, you'll see public advocates a lot of times as a party to the proceeding. You'll see a lot of comments like Natural Resources Defense Council, TURN, California Environmental Justice Alliance. You'll see a lot of that, though. You'll see who's involved, and that can give you a chance as who you might want to contact, and if you have perspectives to share on a proceeding. All our events are on the web page as well, and you're always, you can always browse through. We have a lot of information on our proceedings online as well. We go with the next slide, please. And I think we'll have another. Do we have another slide after that? I don't think we have. There we are. So just a few different ways that you can be involved with these proceedings is through that subscription. You can become a party. Public Advisor's Office can help with that, or attending these as well. We have a lot of workshops associated with our proceedings as well, and we're trying to get always more and better materials online. And you can always reach out to business and community outreach as well. We're here to assist, especially with local governments, community-based organizations, and just help you navigate the PUC, and also, take requests about what we can do to better assist your communities as well. So, with that, I would like to thank our panelists and everyone who attended today. I hope you all found this interesting. And here's our information if you want to follow up more. We're going to be, we have these webinars once a quarter, and hope you can join us again in the near future. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.